Welcome to the SCALE.sdm update today. Hope you're all fine and we can start right now. This is the agenda for today. We start with a short intro and overview, and we'll continue with Scale desktop clients, updates, and features that has been integrated in the last months here. Focuses on Scale model here, and this will be presented by Alexandro, and this is followed by updates for the web client, Scale result, and Scale project here, and Terence will take over here. At any time, you can just ask questions, yeah, feel free to do that in the question and answer section of Zoom. Yeah, just an overview about SCALE.sdm. It consists of several modules. The first one is Scale project. It's dedicated to Scale project monitoring and requirement engineering, followed by model, just for simulation setup, versioning and management of input models and includes, and also submitted to the HPC cluster. Results are stored in Scale result and can then be accessed and compared to tests and simulations. Reports can be done, and the simulation evaluation is done here. Results, key results are just submitted to the Scale project module again, so you can compare your current values with the targets and get an overview about your status of your project. As you may have noticed in the agenda today, we have several client types: and desktop client and a web client. Some features of the desktop clients are just dedicated to a Scale model here, and the web client is mainly focusing on result. We also put some effort in the last months in the user manual. The user manual has been rewritten and is now integrated also in the application. It's a website with some search functionalities here, and you are welcome to try that out and check it out. This manual has also the changelog section here, so any updates we show here and many more are part of the changelog feature here in the manual and could be reviewed here once again. And also there is a link from any changelog entry to the manual itself, so you can just check the details. Where can you find these manual entries in the desktop client? You have in the top right corner this menu here, and you can just check the second entry from the menu. The web client has also a manual integrated, so you just on the top right corner again and just click here that question mark, and then new page will pop up and the menu will be shown. Right before we start with the feature updates, here are two newsletters we have in the company. One is the product updates. You can just sign here for product update that came along with any new version. Key features will be highlighted in that newsletter, so you can stay up to date with that. And on the other side, there are company updates. These are more general conferences where we take part and more general information about the company. You can sign up here if you want. Yeah, that's all from my side, and now we can start with the product features.
Should be able to see my screen. Hello, everyone. I'm Alexandru. Just a few words about me. I'm a technical consultant at Scale based in Ingolstadt, and I will be presenting a couple of model features or model updates. And I'll just get right to them. So the first feature that I will be presenting is the big history graph that we have. So many data objects or most of the data that it's managed with model is versioned. And for each of these objects, I can either view a condensed version of its history, directly in the model tab. This is, for example, the history panel that we see here with a so-called railed graph with a couple of details. This is for, as I've said, as a condensed view of the history of that object. But I can also open a bigger history graph by from the context menu of any version object by clicking on Show History. Then I will get a dedicated tab with the history of that object. As we can see here, in comparison to the condensed history graph that we previously saw, we have a little bit of more information here. Each object is presented with such a card that we can see, and in each card we can see the version number of that object. We can see the owner, the creation date, and the history comment. In this example, for version 2480, the history comment is updated reference versions. And we can also see a list of scenarios, like, for example, China NCAP and Euro NCAP. And these are scenarios corresponding to load cases that were actually assembled or simulated in this version. So in the big history graph, we get a nicer view, or a view with a little bit more of the information. If we select any of the objects we see here, we also get the properties panel on the right side with maybe a little bit more information, but more or less the same that we also see in the cards. And the useful part, or the actual useful part of the big this big history graph is are the filtering capabilities that I can open by clicking on this filter icon in the top left corner. We can define advanced filters here and also combine them. For example, I can add a rule and filter for owner. Just take Marvin. And now I get some of the cards or the version from the graph filtered away, and then I can also add another rule and say, I don't know, for example, tag contains reference, so only show me reference tags. So with this, I can define complex filters. If I want, I can also define filtering rules with the logical condition or. And after I've defined my filter of choices, I can also save this filter and give it a name. And save it such that when I open the history graph again, I don't need to redefine all of these filters, but I can directly set the filters that I've already saved. Yeah. In addition to this, if I remove the filters, we can also connect some versions that we see here manually. So the thick lines that we see here are connections that are created automatically by the version control of the software, but we can also select two versions here and say, okay, these are selected to any of them. versions. Please limit their selection to one. Okay, I should be able to so create a manual link between the two, but for some reason I seem to have also selected an additional pull version somewhere, which I cannot let go from. No, no. Yeah. Okay, so in case this would have worked with which it should have, we should have gotten a dashed line between the two versions, which I can also later delete. Yeah. So this would be the history graph part. The second topic that I wanted to present is the feedback for remote submitted jobs. I have a jobs panel in the model client where I can see all the jobs that I've assembled or submitted to the cluster. And as an example here, I have a job that I submitted yesterday, I think, which is already done. And the job feedback feature delivers information as such as the child nodes or processes or scripts of each of the job that I've submitted. It also delivers messages from each of these nodes or scripts, like for example, that the solving stage is now finished with normal termination, and it also delivers a status for each of the nodes, for example, that it's successfully finished or that it finished with a warning or an error. And the status information from all of these nodes is propagated to the top such that I can see on my job if everything was okay or if there was something wrong. And in case there was something wrong, I could also expand it and see what's wrong. And for running jobs, I can also see how far the progress of my job is by looking at the progress bars here, which are now all of them are full because the job is ready. I also have another job that I submitted for a short time, but it did not start running yet. So that's why I don't have any progress yet. So here the progress bar, for example, is ready. And as soon as it starts running, I will start getting new information after each job update, which happens per default every 5 minutes, but I can also right click in the jobs tab and update the jobs myself. For finished jobs, we also have these bin icons, which are also buttons that we can use to remove jobs that are finished. And there's also a download button that we can use for downloading result files on the machine where also the client is running. In addition to that, we can also select one or multiple jobs in the job tab, and depending on our selection, we will get specific options in the context menu, such as cancel one remote job. This is, for example, the job that I've submitted. I can cancel this job, or for the jobs that are already finished, we will get this remove option. So, for example, I can click on remove. These actions are useful when working with a lot of jobs, and with that, we can easily select all of them by typing Control A and then selecting the the actions that are necessary. Or before that, we can also use the filter here to filter only for some particular jobs, and after we refined our selection, we can select the jobs and either cancel or remove them. This would be the short presentation of the job feedback propagation. The next point or topic that I have is the properties panel, display of properties. For more or less every object that I click and model, regardless if it's just one file or if it is a parameter table or an entire set of data from my project, I always get the properties and the properties panel that we can see here on the right side for the selected object. Depending on which object I selected, I see different information in the properties tab. So it contains corresponding information for the selected object. One of the objects or the object that contains most of the or a lot of information in the properties tab are the run configs or the load cases in model, like the one I've clicked right now. This is a load case, and here I can see that there are many categories that we have. Per default, we see only a couple of them in the expanded mode. If I want to see more information, I can either scroll to the desired category and open it. For example, I can open the parameters category and see all of the parameters defined for this load case. Or I can also use this quick navigation buttons that we have here. We have a button for each property category that we see here. And instead of scrolling down and expanding that category, I can also click on the corresponding button. And in that case, I will automatically get that category scrolled to and opened. In addition to that, I can also use the filter here to search for some property that I expect the object to have, for example, some parameter. Yeah. In this case, it's a parameter, but if I search for roof, for example, I also get an attribute and two parameters. So this will search through all the categories of the properties. And yes, with the quick navigation buttons, I can navigate to the corresponding category faster, and they are usually useful when there is a lot of information in the properties panel. Until now, we've seen the properties of one object, but the properties panel can also be used as a comparison tool because it will also display the properties when I've selected more than one object. For example, now I've selected two load cases instead of one. We can also see this here. I can also select 100 of them. But for demonstration purposes, I have selected only two. And in this case, we get the same categories loaded, but we also get a comparison view, meaning that we, if I will close the categories, we can also see where we have differences and where we don't have any differences. And we can open the categories with differences and look, for example, which parameters have different values for these two runs. In addition to this, the quick navigation buttons that we have here also get this small colored point on the top such that we can see which categories actually contain differences. So for example, I can click on this run configuration category and I can look more specifically at what are the differences in this category for my current selection, so for these two runs. The same also works for components, so I can select, for example, a component. I usually like to take this body in white component as an example, but it works the same for every component. We also get the properties for a component, and we also get special coloring in case we have some warnings or checks with warnings in case of components. And in case of components, we can also select two versions of that component, and we will get the properties displayed again for this component, but for those two versions. So we can also use the properties tab to compare two different versions of one object and actually see what happened or what was changed on that object. In addition to this, we also have this preview, this 3D preview, but this is my example for the next topic, which are the post-edit scripts. So I will come to this in short. So the next and the last point or feature that I want to present are the post-edit scripts. The model client has a very extensive application interface which supports the integration of external applications and scripts. We call them either external application scripts or post-edit scripts. They are very similar. This is a Python application interface, and the users can write their own Python scripts to integrate external applications. And these applications can either be executed by the user. They are always listed in this context menu edit with. I can see all the configured applications or external application scripts, also with the version in the brackets. And the application scripts are the ones that I can execute if I choose to. And the post-edit scripts are the scripts that can be configured to automatically be executed after every edit, which means that each time I edit some particular components, these scripts will be automatically executed. Or I can also trigger the scripts by myself from this update metadata with context menu. We can see that we have two examples of such post-edit scripts, and one of them is this 3D preview. So if I click on it, nothing much will happen. I can see something in the console, but what basically happens is that in the background, the component is exported and the script is executed. And in this case, or in this example, this is a script that creates a 3D preview file that can be shown in this preview panel in the client. So if I click on one of the versions and if that script was executed, and it is executed after each edit operation, the preview is actually attached to the component under attachments. So I can also see the file here under attachments. And if this attachment exists, I will also get the 3D preview in this panel, and I can, for example, look at it and rotate it and maybe get an idea of what has been changed to this component. it does not contain as many details as the component itself contains. As the name says, it's intended as a preview, but it can also be used as a comparison tool. I can, for example, select two versions of the same component, and if both of these versions contain this preview, I will get, as I said, a sort of comparison. So I can see here, for example, that this blue part was changed in one of the versions that I clicked. The orange part was changed in the other version that I've selected. And the red part here was changed in both versions, which means that this is a kind of a conflict between the two versions. This is more or less all the information I can see in this preview, because I said this only intended as a preview. If I want to see in more detail what exactly was changed, I can then use any external application to actually compare the two, or to look at one of these two versions. Yes, and I think that should be also all I had to say about the post-edit scripts. And with that, more or less everything I had to present on the model side.
Hello from my side. I'm going to continue with Scale project and Scale result. And I'm going to focus mainly on two topics. In Scale project, we introduced enhanced requirements management in form of test cases. So I'm going to give brief overview how we manage the requirements with test cases and grouping of test cases. I'm going to show how you are able to manually assess the state, and how you can automatically set the state from Scale result by selecting a test and report the test result directly to the requirement. Then I'm going to show how to aggregate test states via the grouping. And the second part will be a new plotting component in Scale result. So for those who are familiar with the, let's say, old version of the plotting, this has been renewed, and there are now more features available, such as mathematical operations, for example. In the current version, available since, I think, since January, there is a new feature which is quite handy. So now you are able to swap in between the applications here in the top bar. So analog to Scale model, what Alexandru has shown, there is a tab here, and there you can switch between Scale project and Scale result. And if you use the desktop client, you have this application within the desktop client, and then you can switch through all the models. So, but we start with project. So this is basically the normal dashboard overview of a project. You get an entire overview of your projects by list, but we will work here in the demo example of Yaris. So you get a general overview. You can define your projects by documents, a brief description. You can set up multiple milestones with multiple timelines. So you have a main timeline and then subsequent timelines, which you can define. Regarding the requirements, those timestamps, they are stored to the requirement status as well. So by selecting, you can get the state with respect to this time. You can set up some attributes in order to further specify the project. And here, that's a novelty as well. You can now define basically project-specific roles to the project. So one member of your team, for example, is just something like a project contributor in the project, but another project is something like a project manager. And you can set up now the credentials here individually for each member and each project. So let's come to requirements. The smallest entity, or for those who are aware of the old application or the old form, the smallest entity is a requirement itself. So a requirement consists of, let's have a look, basically a name and a test result identifier. So this is the attribute which defines the actual numerical value or some Boolean value or whatever. If depending on the test result identifier, you can set up the display unit, and the conversion, if this value is in SE units, will be done automatically. And then you can define multiple assessment ranks. So here, related to the US NCAP, we set up the classical 5 steps sliding scale: red, brown, orange, yellow, and the boundary values for each rank with individual relation signs, whether it's smaller or greater. This can be freely configured. So if you use the applications maybe outside of the car and crash automotive universe, then you just define different rank levels with different colors, and you're free to use basically this requirement setup just as a tool to compare your performance criteria. Each requirement can be further specified with context attributes. Context attributes, they have two primary purposes. First of all, you can use the context attributes later in the grid of requirements or grid of test cases to set up grouping levels based on the requirements. So in order you want to filter down or group all your requirements or test cases by test type, for example, whether it's front, side, or rear impact, then you just use this attribute. Or if you want to filter by barrier type, then you can filter by barrier type as well. This list can be extended based on the attributes you defined in the application. The second purpose is automatic matching. So this is something I'm going to show later, but based on this context attributes, the application is able to match your tests, which you would like to report to your project, to this specific requirement. So if you run within the project multiple crashes, for example, or multiple tests, maybe for US NCAP or for Euro NCAP and for driver and passenger, then the tests have exactly the same attributes. So the test is specified to be a simulation for the driver. And if you then push the test here to the status, then based on those attributes, the matching takes part, and the results of the test will be stored to this requirement, for example, if the test does have an attribute chest deflection in this case. Here on the right side, you can define whether you want to exclude basically those context attributes from the matching by selecting none, or if it's valid that empty is a permissible value for the attribute, then you just hit empty. Now this is a requirement. And then we introduced test cases. You could consider test cases as a set of requirement. So there you're basically totally free to set up your test cases. Usually the customers in the automotive industry use it for example, for the legal requirements or consumer ratings. To summarize each consumer rating, test case is built up a little bit similar than the requirement. So test case has a name, a further description. You can assign a discipline. You can define whether it's active or inactive. So when you aggregate the status, all the status get aggregated only from the active requirements or test cases. And then you can select here which requirements are summed up in this test case. So in our case, it was those 4. Where do you define the test cases and the requirements? In the configuration area of the application. Some key user, for example, is able to define, first of all, the list of requirements. So this is usually quite a lengthy list. And analog to this, someone can define here the list of test cases and simply selects new times test case 1, defines all what needs to be defined, and then filters down here the requirements which should be included. So maybe if for some reason we check again for US NCAP. First of all, you can group regarding your attributes, and then simply select if this is basically now China NCAP, then you can filter down your requirements and basically set up your test case like this. So this is one side. You basically globally for the application, you can define a list of test cases, and then in the project, you can choose from this list of MDM test cases which test cases you want to include in your project. So we are here back again. So let's say, okay, I'm going to show now again this US NCAP 0 degree frontal impact. And then you just look for your test case, and this would be here, the very top one. You select, save, and then a derivative of this test case gets added here to the list. And now the test cases here has been extended by 1. Now we have to look, where is it? US NCAP. It's here the top one. So now the project has this requirement, and apparently no status has been set yet. So let's go to the way how to select a status or define a status. As I was mentioning earlier, there are basically 2 ways. One is a manual assessment. Therefore, you just select the requirements you would like to report a status to. We have a sidebar option here where you first of all see all the details of the requirements. You get a threshold overview, the context attributes which were defined, and most importantly here the historization. So apparently in preparation of today's meeting, I've already done something, but the history includes as well all the statuses which has been reported publicly. And then of course attachment if there would be any. So the manual status report works as follows. You hit report status, and you can define a value. So what is this chest deflection? Let's assume you have minus 40 millimeters. You get an automatic assessment. You can override the automatic assessment by a manual selection. There the tiny hand appears, and this will be highlighted here later in the grid. So whoever has looked at this knows, okay, something has been changed manually and the assessment hasn't been done based on the actual numerical value. In this case, it is mandatory to type a comment. So let's say measurement uncertainty, whatever. You can attach files, and then you can decide whether you save this value privately or public. Private is just accessible for you. So if you log in and you want to store something like an intermediate project state, then you store it privately. If you're happy with your result and would store it publicly, then you hit save public, and then the status is available to everyone who has access here basically to this project requirements overview. Let's start with save public. Exactly. So here we get the original value. The assessment would be yellow due to the rank assessment. And here's the actual assessment, which is orange because we defined it manually to be an orange rank. You see the comment and you see basically whether it has been stored privately or publicly. You get an overview who did it and when. As you can see here, there's already aggregation. So basically on the definition of your grouping here, the states get aggregated automatically. So if you have a view like this, in order to see all your test cases, you get, let's collapse this here a little bit. You get already a good overview. Okay, what's the summarized state of my test cases? In this case, we only reported orange. So this is summarized to orange. If you further introduce another grouping level, let's go to directive, for example. Then the assessment gets aggregated as well through the entire hierarchy of your grouping. So in this case, it is orange. And because we have here basically this manual orange value, and this does not belong here to the group because it does not belong to a test case. So basically this test case or state aggregation works all over the groups. This grouping can be stored as a default view. So if you define for your project, basically that you have a grouping of your test cases and requirements in that way, then you can store this view here on the right side of the grid at views. There's always a default view. If you are admin for the project, you can define a global default. So if all your project members log in, to this requirements view, then they see the default view I've defined. Or if you want to define a personal view, just my default view with directive. You can store them here, save them, and then, okay, the default view by any accident included directive as well. But then you just go back to your default view, and then you can have all your views. Now, maybe here for the demo, it's not quite obvious why this is useful, but usually you can have more than 100 test cases, including more than 100 requirements each, or then basically this grouping becomes quite effective in order to get a small or basically precise overview or summary of your states. Now, again, if you store the state public, and you said, okay, I made a measurement as well. This has been improved now, and test deflection reduced to -35. No comment necessary. Then you hit save public, and then again, it is stored public. So if any other user logs into this project now, the user would see the public state. Yeah. Okay, and again, who did it and when? And now the public state is stored in the history as well. So as you can see, I did it just now and changed the value from undefined. It was undefined because there was no public state before to now the current state. And this is here defined in SE units. So if another user would now basically change this to this value, again, saves it as public, then you see here the change. Only the public changes are stored in the history. Okay, this is basically the manual setting of states. And as I introduced earlier, this can be done automatically based on your test grid. So therefore, I swap to scale result and to the test grid. You need to select the project, Yaris. So basically now you see all the tests related to this project, and in this project we defined the project test cases, so therefore this needs to be aligned here. In scale result you have the options, since I think there are more than 2,000 tests here, to define collections, which is something like a folder of your favorite simulations or tests. I think I've prepared here something, webinar, exactly. I deselect this, and here in the grouping, I already grouped it accordingly. So we set up a test case for US NCAP front. So I introduced here, the concept is exactly the same with the context attributes. So the attribute directive and type of test has been used here as grouping context attribute. So US NCAP front impact, and then we have a couple of simulations. And I want to report number 10 and number 11. I'm not quite sure whether it's better with respect to the assessment values, but then I can simply check by set as project status. Now, based on the context attribute, the matching takes part. So the application checks, okay, which load cases are existing in the project and which do fit to the context attribute, to the context attributes of the test cases and requirements. Okay, we have here 2 times the same or a similar load case, but if you remember, we just introduced or included the US NCAP one. So here we see a summary of the assessment for our test 10, and here we see the summary of the assessment for our test 11. Apparently the second one seems to be better, more is green and nothing is red. Then you have the option to either select your test case and directly save the status. Again, this is the same switch as in the side panel. Either you save it publicly or privately. Let's assume we are not quite sure that we save it privately. Then you have further the options if you are aware that some uncertainties, measurement errors or whatnot, manual changes necessary, then you can get here to the details view. You can, same procedure as in the sidebar, manually change the assessment. if you decide that minus 4.8 kilonewtons is green, then you have the same symbols here, and it becomes mandatory to write a comment. If you do not write a comment, you cannot report the status. So manual override by Ferenc. The same applies if you change manually the numerical values for some reason. So let's do here the same. Say, okay, this was again a measurement error. This was minus 40 chest deflection. Then you get basically here the assessment, and it is mandatory to write a comment as well. Measurement uncertainty. And you get an indication this has been edited manually. You go back to your overview. This has been changed now, apparently. You get a red exclamation mark, Obacht, or alert, something has changed. And, sorry, somehow due to tab, I changed this as well. So I need to write something here. Perfect, and now we go back. Yeah, sorry. Apparently hitting tab. Yeah, so I was hitting the wrong key, so this has been changed. My mistake. Nevertheless, same result. And then you are able to hit save, and the status gets sent to Scale project. So let's have a look how it's going to look like. We go back to project, select our project, go to requirements, and now our state has changed. And as you can see here, red, it is private. So the status report we just submitted has been shown here, and it is exactly the same. So the numerical status is summed up here, and here we have the assessment status, which we changed manually. And again, the aggregated status now changed to red. So now in the workflow, another colleague would go back to the project and says, okay, assuming it's basically the same, he reports this. Well, let's take the other test. Reports this one and is quite sure, okay, everything is right. No update is necessary. Then this can be published as public. Hit save and let's go to our default view. And then we get here the green assessment because we changed it. Sorry, the yellow assessment. One was yellow, so this is basically the aggregation logic that basically the weaker rank is summed up here in the assessment. That's about the requirements, test cases, and status setting. The second topic would be regarding plotting. Are there any questions regarding test cases and requirements? Nope. And then we go back to result. So the second part is regarding the plotting. And for those who use or who are familiar with the application, if you selected something here and hit plot, you got an XY dependency and with basically no features. And we exchange this component to a new component where you are able to apply operations, move your axis, style your plots, and then include them in a report, or just store them as a screenshot and include them basically in a PowerPoint if you want to do so. This is what I'm going to show. So let me select some channels. Currently, it is available. The plot component can be opened here from this channel overview. So basically, for each channel, you can select one or many channels of one or many tests and upload them to the plot component. So let's go for add some force. I prepared a list. Exactly. So we would like to include a barrier force, and then we maybe want to include some Yeah, the selection stays active if you filter down. And here we are. So exactly, so that's basically a rail on the left side and the right side, and we go for the pre-filtered displacements, accelerations, and velocities. And I double check if the force is still selected. So you select your channels you would like to plot, and then the plot component automatically creates axes depending on the units you have selected. So we've selected the force, displacement, velocity, and acceleration, and therefore we get 4 coordinate systems. This is basically the general view, and we introduced here a sidebar where you can set up all the settings and layout options. You get a general overview of your channels. Second structure level is the plot. So this is basically plot number 1, plot number 2, and so on. In the third level, you have the tests. So we selected now only coming from non-test, but as soon as you select 2 tests, you will have here a hierarchy for the tests and then the contained channels from the test itself. Here on the side, there are some basic drag and drop features. There is copy paste as well with Control C and Control V. You can rearrange the order of your axis based on those elements. So if you say, okay, I want acceleration, speed, displacement in this order, then you select this order. In the second part, you have the plot configuration. This is active related to your selection. So if you select this one, okay, this is now the title, but then you get the features related to this object. And if you select basically this plot, then you get the plot configuration for this plot. If you select this one, then so on for this plot. That's plot configuration. Here you get a way to access the configuration levels, which you can access by directly selecting the elements. So each unit has basically the same feature, title, some styling. You can change the unit, the scale, and the range here manually. And then, of course, there are some basic drag and drop zoom features. You can change the legend, where it's supposed to be inside, outside, north, south, west, east. And the layout here, vertical is useful, but you can stack them up horizontal as well. And you can define whether you want even want to see the legend or not. Exactly. Then you can add a coordinate system. And why would you do that? If you say, okay, I'm going to make some operations, and therefore I want to see them in a new coordinate system, then you just add a new coordinate system. And then, as I mentioned, with drag and drop, you can just copy your data within this application. Let's remove this. We introduced for this, let's say, basic state of plot component, some basic operations or calculations. Yeah, they are now structured in main operations. We are currently working on the extension of this list of operations. But for this initial release, we introduced some basic things like crossplot, integral. Now differential is available as well, but will be published in the next release. And maybe for people working in the crash environment, CFC filters. So all your filter classes are available here with the 2 standards and then the 4 filter classes. The selection of the operations is dependent on the amount of channels you select. So there is a validator included. If crossplot, for example, needs 2 selections, therefore you select 2 and you see which operation is available. You can either sum them up or create a crossplot. If you hit 1, okay, crossplot is not available, but all the others are available. So you find this here in calculate. As I mentioned, the list becomes longer and longer. So we introduced a search bar here as well. And the very last one is a general configuration. At the moment, there is just the definition of the layout. So this is not a matrix view, but if you say, okay, I want to align them vertically, then you just select the plots per row. If you say you want to align them horizontally, then you can define this here, or quadratic. So how does it work here in the application? What is, or basically this plot component, what is possible to do? So let's assume we have selected now the left part and the right part here of this rail, then there are some, well, let's say general features. So all the 14s or all the left one. So you can define multiply select basically your channels, and then curve style operations, they are applied to all of your selected ones. So let's assume we want to see the left ones all in blue and the right ones all in red. And then you realized, okay, the acceleration you would like to filter down, then you just select your channel. Maybe I need to remove this one, and we want to apply CFC filters. Oh, sorry, I accidentally deleted the channel. So CFC, and we would like to use filter class 60. Then the result appears in this coordinate system, which is fitting the unit. And if there is in integration case, for example, you would have no fitting unit, then automatically a new coordinate system gets created. So let's disable this, and this will be our red one. And then what would you like to do next? Then you can rename this. So simply select what you like to rename, and this is basically now acceleration. Acceleration, then you have velocity. We have displacement. And maybe you wanted to introduce here a force displacement curve as well. So we have here our force and here our displacement. Then you decide you just need to apply the cross plot. Sorry. Oh, it deselected the force. Sorry. Maybe start here at the beginning. And the force, and then you just select it, change the order. Yeah, for all the operations, we introduced some mandatory fields. So here for the cross plot, you need to select, do you want to apply merge or line space for the interpolation if anything is necessary, and the tolerance. Depending on the operations, there's already here a small info box. So this indicates you what you need to do and gives you some explanations. Nevertheless, those explanatory texts are included in the user manual as well. And then you apply or select apply, and then here you would see your result. And maybe this is really more from interest, and you just deselect this one and include this one. Exactly what you can do with this in the current status, you select screenshot and a download link gets created, and it gets downloaded to your local drive, since I'm using here the web client. And yeah, and then you could basically open it and include it in a PowerPoint. In the next release, it will be available that this sequence of operations is stored and can be stored in forms of a template. So in the next time, you don't have to go through all these operations manually. You just select a template, and then this final result appears automatically based on the channels defined in the template. But here in the demo, it's the, let's say, the older release. It is not available, but in the next release, it will be published. What we already did is we exchanged this plot component in our web reports. So for those who were using our web reports, we used to report, crash report. And let's use this text. In our web reports, you can introduce basically all the components available here in the application and create a standardized overview of your post data. And here we exchange basically this plot component. So if you define a web report with multiple channels, then you can access basically here the same features I've just shown, but here in the web report. And then basically this pre-selections of channels, which I did manually, has been already defined here in the web report. And if necessary, you can make here any changes, change coloring, line style, and export it. If you want to do further things, or let's say more comprehensive things, then you have here the option to change to the full screen mode, and you don't have to work here in this cram space in the web report. Exactly. So this is basically exactly the same component I've just shown, but it is embedded in this report structure. Okay, those were actually the two topics in Scale Result and Scale Project. I don't know if there are any questions related to those topics. I will have a look if there are some questions in the chat. That's not the case. I think we scheduled this appointment or this update for 1.5 hours. Yeah, we had 20 minutes to go. So if there are no questions, Alexandro, I don't know if you have something to add.
No, not really. I can
Not
also
really.
answer questions if there are any.
And yeah, maybe on the webpage, you have the ability to assign for our newsletter, or if you would like to have access here to the demo, for example, just write an email to info@scale.eu, and then we provide an user credentials for you, and you can try out the features of the current release all by your own. Yeah, so if there are no questions, I think it's early lunch for everyone, at least for those people who are located in a time zone where it's lunchtime now. And yeah, that's from my side. Thank you very much for all the people who were joining, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.